One of the key objectives of this policy is to expand affordable housing options. Can you just briefly explain how the target of 1,000 affordable homes over the next 10 years could be achieved?
So one of the key things is we need to look at the way that we prioritise builds. So there's lots of schemes with the local authorities, for instance, that are actually where the local authorities are looking to do their stock. Douglas has a 10-year plan. And what we need to do is look at the way we currently do financing for social housing. It's very much, I think, at the moment looked at as being a bit of a debt, when in fact, actually, it's an investment. So it's about looking at the financing models and ensuring that we are able to release capital that we can actually use to actually get those houses built. So government has been very firm in saying it's 1,000 houses over 10 years. It's quite radical, it's quite ambitious, because it's the first time, as far as I can see, there's ever actually been put in writing a firm pledge from an administration to actually do this and drive this forward.
The document talks about a proposed housing association. Would you be able to just elaborate on how that might function?
So the model for the housing association at the moment is being devised. I'm not going to preempt what is actually potentially going to go before Tynwald. Ultimately, it's a Tynwald decision as to how the housing association may function, or indeed if we actually have a housing association at all. There's still certain permission stages to go through in the parliamentary process. But the plan would be at first that a housing association would purely be a manager of DOI stock. So it creates that division that isn't there at the moment, because DOI is both a landlord and a regulator, which has never personally sat comfortable with me. It would allow the transfer of the DOI stock, and then longer term, the housing association will be looking to see how it can actually drive forward other areas as well, such as first-time housing, such as expansion of public sector housing, and also potentially first-time buyer schemes.
There is talk about potential legislative changes around empty properties and tenancy laws. What kind of regulatory framework is being considered, and how might that affect landlords and tenants?
So this is in relation to the Empty Properties Report, which has now been published, the vacant properties. So there are various models that are being looked at. Many of these have been discussed in public already around the potential for not giving the zero rating to properties that are actually left empty for a substantial period of time. There's ways of looking to try and get them back into circulation through other mechanisms, such as people being able to apply for certain loans, potentially to actually get a property brought back into circulation. There's various carrot and stick options, and those reports have been in the public domain and those debates for quite a while now. The important thing is that we actually drive this forward, because housing always comes as a package. And I think the problem is we spend too long sometimes focusing in on the individual elements. So looking at first-time buyers in isolation, looking at retirement, potential downsize housing in isolation, looking at public sector housing in isolation. And what we need to do is actually look at it in its totality. And that is what the OHAN has been doing. And that is what the government strategy driving off this OHAN is doing.
The response emphasises the need for cross-departmental cooperation. Government is often accused of silo mentality. This document has already got various departments feeding information into it. I note you are now a member of Comin, so it may be tricky to answer this, but do you think there is a willingness from the various departments to get this done properly without any sort of silo mentality?
No trickiness at all. In fact, the role I've got in Council of Ministers is Cabinet Office, so it's sitting at the centre. And one of the key things for me, and I've spoken on it many, many times, is ensuring that government's joined up. My personal view, as I've expressed many, many times in Tynwald, is that government in the past has been too siloed, too fractious, with departments not working together. We have to ensure with this housing strategy, and that is the reason we have a Housing Communities Board, is that all the different departments and areas of government are joined up, heading in the right direction. And in fact, we have already started seeing that, because if we hadn't had those parts joined up, we wouldn't have the response that's in front of us now going before Tynwald.
Some might argue that promises to confirm sites for supported living within a year or deliver 1,000 homes over 10 years lack urgency given the current housing crisis. How would you respond to concerns that the timeline is too slow?
Well, actually, I don't think the timeline is too slow. Don't forget that is the aim. There is nothing to stop us exceeding those targets. And there are actually programmes already in chain, particularly around public housing, that will help us meet those targets. So there's nothing actually for us to stop us going further if we are able to do so. But we've also got to be realistic. This isn't a problem that's come about in the life of this administration. It isn't even a problem that's come about in the life of the last administration. This is a problem that has been building for 20 odd years. And this administration has grasped the nettle and decided we need to tackle it. And like I say, it's not as simple as just building houses. There are other issues as well. It's about ensuring that we have schemes in place that people can afford that housing that we're building, and that the different mix of housing is right. Because we could just throw up a load of houses quite quickly, but we need to ensure they're the right type of housing and where the demand is. And, there's different things that tie into it. So, you can't just rush this thing. It's got to be done properly and it's got to be done correctly.
With planning and infrastructure projects often facing delays, how do you plan to mitigate risks that could slow down housing development? And do you anticipate there'll be any planning reforms to action any part of this policy response?
Yeah, so there will most definitely need to be some changes to planning. Planning policy is being looked at within Cabinet Office, where I am now the Minister. And I know DEFRA has also been looking in relation to amendments to planning legislation, which hopefully will be coming forward shortly. So most definitely, we also have, of course, the Island Strategic Plan, which is currently under review and is being looked at by Cabinet Office. So this all does feed in. It's like I was just talking about before, about ensuring all the elements are joined up. It's not just about the build of the physical houses itself. It's about ensuring that everything around that, which includes, most people will probably find a bit more boring and not as exciting, but it's essential, is planning law and ensuring that's in the right place. And that work is already going on across government.
The commuted sum is effectively a buyout from having to provide affordable housing. Do you think that goes far enough to try and disincentivise the lack of building affordable housing?
Well, I've been very clear personally on the record, my views on the commuted sum. I was very clear about them when I was chair of planning, that I think it needs reform. And I think the commuted sum is something we need to look at as to how it's operating. I've also been very clear there will always be circumstances where a commuted sum is the right option. So, for instance, if someone is building a large, expensive block of flats, you wouldn't want first-time buyers in there because there is an ongoing, cost relating to that. So a management fee that might not be affordable to them. So there are circumstances where a commuted sum is appropriate, and there always will be. But we do need to ensure that we look at ensuring that a commuted sum isn't the go-to. That it is used only in circumstances that are appropriate.
Former Minister Laurie Hooper has said that there's not always been a lot of discussion about housing in Comyn, which may perhaps surprise you. If that is the case, do you intend to put it firmly on the agenda of Comyn's weekly meetings now that you are a minister?
Well, I think housing has been discussed in Council of Ministers. As chair in the Housing Community Board, before I actually even became minister this week, I've been into Council of Ministers several times as chair of the Housing Communities Board, and a lot of what the Housing Communities Board does requires Council of Ministers approval. So it has actually been quite a few discussions at Council of Ministers that I've seen myself. Mr Hooper, of course, was a member of the Housing Communities Board as well when he was Minister for DHSC, and a very valuable member on the board at that. So I think there has been a lot of conversations going on, and I think there will most definitely be a lot more going forward.
Thank you for making it to the end of the Manx Radio Newscast. You are obviously someone with exquisite taste. May I politely suggest you might want to subscribe to this and a wide range of Manx Radio podcasts at your favourite podcast provider, so our best bits will magically appear on your smartphone. Thank you.